Irfan Ahmed, and I'm a professor of anthropology and sociology in the Faculty of Social Science and Humanities at Ibn Haldun University in Istanbul.
Right. So right now, as we all know, in Sweden and in Denmark, Qur'ans are being burned, especially in front of embassies. People in Denmark will tell you these are small burnings, like no one is barely noticing. How does it still have the potential to spark such an anger within the Muslim world?
Yeah, so see, I think this issue needs to be seen very differently. What I mean by this is that for many Westerners, and especially those who burn the Qur'an, they often take it as a book, as a religious book. From the Muslim perspective, it is a kitab, it is a book, but it is not simply a book. It is more than a book. It is, in Arabic, it is known as hidayah, guidance. So it is a source of hope for many Muslims. There are Muslims who do not understand the Quran, but they recite it. Or if someone else is reciting, they listen to it. There are poor women who might be sick and they may not understand any word of the Quran, but in times of distress, in times of difficulties, they rely on the Quran as a source of hope, as a source of comfort. Okay? Now, if you see the Muslim perspective of the Quran is very different. It is a book of guidance, not simply for life here, which is the empirical material world, but for them, for believing Muslims, because they also believe that there is a life after death. So it also gives meaning to Muslims, not about just the world here, but also the life after your death. Now, from the Western perspective, of course, those who burn the Quran, there are also additional things. They take it as a book, and then their immediate understanding is that this is a book of violence. This is a book of intolerance. Okay? But as I explained to you, for Muslims, this is not what it is. But I would go one step further and say that as a student of religion, and I've also studied not simply Islam, but also other religious tradition. Now, to describe Quran as a book of intolerance, or in the Western press, of course, the most used word is jihad. So you make an association between Quran, jihad, violence. Sometimes there is also an association with patriarchy or subordination of women, and so on and so forth, right? Now, I think that is not a correct view. As a student of religion, I also know that all the passages of the Bible are not necessarily about love. You have passages in Matthew which talks about sword rather than peace, right? But you will not find Muslims. Okay, it is not that Muslims do not know about these passages, but still they respect the Bible. They respect the Torah. So, unlike these Westerners, in my view, the response of the Muslims, and I'm not justifying the response of those Muslims who take to the street and do protest in a violent way. In my perspective, that is wrong. You have a right to protest, but this should be done in a peaceful way, and also not in an antagonistic way to antagonize other people, but to persuade them, to make your point that, look, what you are doing is not correct. So I think this is the reason why the response of Muslims to the issue of the burning of the Quran is radically different, because I think the Western view of the Quran is radically different from the way Muslims themselves view Quran. And I gave you some examples of what the difference lies. The Western view is not correct in my view, because it is not based on a thorough, rational judgment. It is based on a very biased view, and it is also enmeshed, I think, in contemporary politics, where you want to create this us versus them dichotomy. And therefore, I think we need to be very careful of such people who do this politics of enmity, to create differences between Muslims, Christians there are Christians who may be believing Christians, but probably many of them are secular, some of them may be even atheist, right? But the point is, we should not be creating a condition in which hatred and enmity flourish. Rather, our effort should be to create a mutual understanding of peaceful coexistence.
Right. So this brings us to the next obvious question here, because in Denmark, most people perceive freedom of expression as a fundamental right that you cannot infringe. And when the politicians say, oh, maybe we can do something to ban these burnings, people would take it like a personal thing and say, you cannot infringe on my right.
Right.
What do you make of that?
So see, I think freedom of expression as a phrase, a lot of people use it without necessarily understanding or realizing its true meaning. Now, what I mean by this, in many cases, and I would give you some examples from the West itself, when we do not know how to articulate our unfreedom, then we say that actually it is freedom. Now, let me explain this. If people think that going to a supermarket and you want to buy toothpaste, and there may be 20 varieties of toothpaste, from Pepsodent to Colgate and what have you, and you think that making that choice, rather than buying Pepsodent, you buy Colgate, and you think that, oh, you have exercised your freedom of choice. Okay? That is also the popular meaning of what freedom means. But if you analyze it at a deeper level, all these toothpaste, more or less, so I'm not saying that they are all identical, there may be differences, but you have a different version of the same, and then people make choice. So for example, I would say that, if you go to traditional India, they don't use toothpaste, they use twigs of the bamboo, twigs of the tree. But in most supermarkets, you will not find it. You find different version of the same toothpaste, and you think that you have made a choice. You exercise your freedom of choice. Okay? But the fact that you do not have the twigs, the bamboo twigs, to also clean your teeth, it is never taken into account, for example, that why the supermarket doesn't have that. Okay? That would, in my view, constitute what is freedom of choice.
So if you should sum up this for, make a little bit of a generalization here from the Muslim world, why will most Muslims not think that it is a valid excuse to burn a Qur'an that we say, oh, we have freedom of expression?
Yeah, so I will give you a more concrete example. Mein Kampf, which is My Story, the book written by Hitler. If you go to India, this book is freely sold at the railway station. When I was in the Netherlands, and we had a similar kind of discussion about freedom of expression, so I asked my Dutch friends, and he said that no, but that is not freedom of expression. Now, you have to ask this question, that in India, people are reading it. Okay? They do not see that book by Hitler in the same way as Dutch or Europeans see it. So from a freedom of expression perspective, you would ask, in Holland, for example, in the Dutch library also, you will not find that book. Forget about open bookstore. So if you go to Amsterdam, there is a famous square called Espau, where is Athenaeum book store. You will not find that book. It is not even in the library, like for consultation purpose. So you are making a choice when it comes to mean kaf, you say that no, this is not a freedom of expression, right? What is the basis behind it? There are many, like for example, if I read it, okay, so reading something doesn't necessarily mean that I am also going to practice it. Because from a Western perspective, I am an independent, rational person. I will read that book, I will make my own judgment. But the ban is based on the idea that if someone reads it, he or she will become like Hitler. So you are not respecting the autonomy of that individual. You follow? So you are making a choice. Okay?
But are you saying then, is that argument then saying that we should not ban the burning of the Quran?
No, what I'm saying is that in the Western world, if you have banned mean kaf, there is certain reasoning behind it, there is certain logic behind it. And there you don't invoke the principle of freedom of expression. Okay? And I gave you the reason why it is. So from the same perspective, I think burning the Quran, it is again taken in a very mistaken way that, oh, in burning the Quran, you are actually exercising your freedom of expression. What I am saying is that this is a wrong understanding of what you mean by freedom of expression. Okay? Let me also make a related point. When people talk about freedom of expression, we do not often take into consideration that there is something else which is called freedom from expression. So there are many people in the West, in the non-West, everywhere. So for example, to what extent the voice of the racialized, stigmatized black people find expression in the public media in America? No, for them, there is a very limited way of freedom of expression. For them, what exists in practice is freedom from expression. We know, I have done some work about public media, and I know that there is certain kind of voice in certain places which is allowed and certain voices are not allowed. So certain voice has freedom of expression for certain people, but for the rest of the people, they have been freed from a speech. They do not find their voice articulated in the public domain. But nobody talks about why certain people, certain categories of people have been freed from a speech, why we do not get their viewpoint articulated in the public domain.
To get into more current matters, then today our Prime Minister, Mette Frederiksen, she's been out with the same proposal as our Foreign Minister has already been out and talking to Turkey about, let's ban these Quran burnings in front of embassies. If that gets through, if that passes, do you then think this conflict will be over?
Well, I'm not a futurist, so I cannot predict, but logically speaking, I think definitely it will ease the situation. But here I want to also say something else, which is to say that our approach should not be simply instrumentalist. So if it is for economic purposes or if it is for trade purposes, okay, we have to also have a moral and ethical dimension. So it is just like saying that if you came to visit me and if I offer you a glass of water, okay, and I offer you a glass of water only because you have come to interview me. But if you come to me, but the purpose is not interviewing, it is just like saying hello, and then I don't offer you a glass of water, then I am looking at you in a very instrumental way. So my point is that banning the burning of Quran, okay, it will ease the situation, but we should not be doing it simply as a strategic or instrumental thing, because I think at stake here is the question about respect, equality.
I would just want to hear, so now we're talking about Mette Frederiksen, our Prime Minister. She came out with this proposal,
Yes.
but then there are 7 parties of the opposition who've been out and saying, no, we cannot do this because this would be an infringement on our freedom of expression. So it's not possible. What do you make of that?
Yeah, you see, I have a historical explanation of this, the stance of the opposition parties. So again here, you have to see that if the objection that they are raising against the Prime Minister, right? If the objection is genuine or instrumentalist. So in party politics, there is always an effort to show your opposition in bad light. And it is like debates that children have in schools where the point is to, the goal is to score points, okay? If they have that purpose, then it is definitely not a good thing. If they are really concerned about freedom of speech, I would say that use that idea of freedom of speech for something which is more inclusive, something which benefits humanity beyond the divide of race, religion and ethnicity. So why don't you use your freedom of speech? So I'm not saying that Muslims should also have freedom to burn Bible or Torah. No, from an Islamic perspective, that is wrong, because you are not respecting the faith of other people.
But should they not be allowed to do it if they wanted to?
You mean the Danish citizens?
No, yeah, everyone should also, the Muslims, not be allowed to burn the Bible if they want to.
No, so that is where I want to say that no, the idea of freedom is the very idea of freedom. So you say you are in Denmark and you are driving a car. You see a traffic light. There is a red sign and you stop. Now you can say that no, I have a freedom to.
No, because it's in the law. It says you cannot stop. You have to stop
right.
Because the red light.
But you are obeying the red light.
Yes.
Right?
It's in the law.
It is in the law.
But in the law also says that I'm allowed to burn the Qur'an if I want to.
Well,
so one of the things that people are scared of connecting to this is that they feel like now Turkey has come in and made a demand into Danish national legislation, right? And they're very scared that, okay, if Turkey is almost threatening Denmark to make legislation saying, oh, maybe we won't continue relations in the same way, then is it not a slippery slope to say yes, so Turkey can just push on and maybe get other things pushed through in
well, that seems like a paranoid kind of response. What I would say that, so it is just like, for example, child labor, okay? So there are many countries which have passed the law against child labor, right? And you can say that no, in order to follow the United Nations thing, my nation state is getting under pressure from the United Nations to pass a law against child labor. So this is an interference, okay? That is not a good logic, and that will of course raise other questions, which is like where the domestic begins or ends and where the international thing starts. But from the perspective of the freedom, what I want to say that you, and it is for the Danish people themselves, that they cannot be free as long as the rest of the humanity is unfree. So my freedom is bound up with your freedom. So if you just want to have freedom in a small territory, it is like whatever, 3 million or 4 million population, right?
Actually.
5 million, right? So the point is that in this global world, I think, my freedom I cannot be a free person in a genuine sense if there are other people, either they are within our nation or outside of our nation or my nation. The freedom of one person within territory is equally tied to the freedom of people outside. And therefore, I think this nationalist way of thinking is not sufficient. I mean, in Denmark, of course, you have international company, and these are not necessarily national company. So you might say that, well, this is not our company. Why would have a store which is from outside? But you don't say that. So there is a limit to that.
And talking about these international companies within Denmark right now, if this conflict keeps escalating, right? If Qur'ans keep getting burned, if the anger continues, do you think it could escalate into like a conflict where I don't know, trade relations or different cooperation things will end, or?
Yeah. So again, this is like about what might happen in the future, and I wish I had the power to predict.
Yeah, I'll ask in a different way.
Yeah.
Is there potential for this to escalate?
It might. So there are two options. It can lead to potentiality of conflict, but we as humans also have the power to transform it into a different direction. So not one of conflict and enmity, but one where there is cooperation and trust. And I would say that the Danish government should not be doing just for instrumental or a strategic reason. It should also be doing from an ethical and moral perspective. I will give you an example. So Australia used to supply beef to Indonesia. Some groups in Australia said that, invoking the idea of animal cruelty, because when you do, the English word is slaughter the cows, so you do it in an Islamic way. It is like for the Jews, which is called kosher, right? So some animal rights activists said that no, this is like doing cruelty to animals. When Australia conveyed this to Indonesia, they said that okay, we will not buy meat from you. And then Australian government backtracked. So what is the reason for Australian government to backtrack? Economy, because it is one of the source of wealth.
Yeah, so I see it should come with also like the heart behind it, and not only
with a moral thing. And if you go back to the example of love and partner, so I was just saying that you cannot love your partner just as a physical entity, but also
it's a whole thing. Yeah. A lot of Danish people remember back to what we call the cartoon crisis, where the Prophet Muhammad was drawn and it was published in newspapers. That created an uproar within the Muslim community, and it's something that a lot of Danish people still remember and are pretty scared of. Do you think that this situation with the Quran burning has the potential to become the same sort of issue?
It could, and that is where I would also suggest that what I think this is a wrong notion of freedom of expression. So whether it comes to drawing of the cartoons of the Prophet, and of course, as you remember, that time one of the arguments which was given in defense of these cartoons is that look, it is about humor, it is about sarcasm. Again, I think this is not the correct idea of either humor or sarcasm. Now, as a non-white person, I have been traveling to the US very often, And in 98% cases, whenever I am at the American airport, somebody comes and tells me, "Sir, you have been selected for a special check." Okay? Now, there, am I allowed to make any sarcasm or humor? If I say, so the person asks me that, "Are you carrying any metal or fire thing?" And I say that, "Of course I am doing." And then I say that, "No, I was just joking." Right? So, humor and sarcasm, so I am not saying that, Islam has a sense of humor. In Islamic tradition, there is a place for humor and place for smile and laughter. But I think the way this Danish cartoonist, he understands humor or criticism, this is not the correct way. If he is really wanting to do that, think about this alternative example at the airport that I gave you.
Yeah, that's an interesting comparison.
Yeah.
So where would you say that this crisis right now, with the Qur'an burnings, is contra the cartoon crisis back in the days? Like, it still has a long way to go before it's as serious. Or how do you see it?
Yeah, so I think, as many commentators have pointed out, there are also many factors, and I don't want to go into, there are sort of geopolitical stuff at play here. There is international factors, there is factors of Russia and so on, and everything in my knowledge has not even come to the fore, that who is behind this, what are the other players. But I think in my view, what the Danish government should do is to look at this issue in a more sober and cool way, rather than, in my view, a very unsophisticated way of what freedom of expression is. I don't think that it is actually a question of freedom of expression. We know from history, we know I've lived in Germany, I've given interview to Deutsche Welle, but Deutsche Welle likes only certain kind of things they publish, and there I don't have freedom of expression.
So today our Prime Minister went out and said, stop guys, banning book burnings in front of embassies is not infringing on your freedom of expression. It's not your freedom of speech, it's a different thing. Do you agree with her on that?
Yeah, so I would add to that, I think this is a good move, and I would add that not simply in front of the embassy, okay, if you do it at a square. So when you say the embassy, clearly one is thinking about the government or the nation state. And my point throughout this conversation has been that no, for Muslims it is not like, okay, the government may take a stand, but from your individual belief and your sense of who you are, and I gave you this example of a sick poor person, Qur'an has a very different meaning. So it should not be just about banning it in front of the embassy. I'm talking about more a sort of general ethos, a respect to a tradition and culture, and therefore it should go beyond embassy.
What should it be? How do you think it should be legislated?
So legislation can be one part, but
should it be all Qur'ans?
Yes.
Can you just
Yeah.
say that in
So,
one sentence?
so from a Muslim perspective, I don't think it should be just a law which says that no, only the burning of the Qur'an is wrong. No, it should be in a way which says that burning of the religious books of people of all faith is wrong. And that is where, so you see, if we frame it that way, that is also a question of equality, by the way. So I am giving, by making a law like this, I'm respecting not simply the tradition of one faith, but this respect is extended to all, to people from all faiths. So definitely, it should be inclusive.